It,
Good morning. Alex Garcia here with Kanai Optical. What we're going to go over today is a brief description of how to connect a video endoscope, an Olympus video endoscope, to the tower and to check color and white balancing. So what we're going to work with today is an Olympus GIF 160, working with a CV160 tower or video processor and xenon light source. When connecting to your processor, if we look over here and go into your to some of the features of the processor and the tower, we want to make sure that everything is turned on as it relates to the monitor. When we connect the scope to the processor or to the tower, we want to make sure the light guide or the connector area of the scope is connected and seated properly into the light source. And to make sure it does seat properly, you do want to make sure you hear a click, that it sits into the light source. When connecting the video connecting cable, or sometimes referred to as the video pigtail, you want to make sure that your alignment pins or your alignment slots are lined up with your connector to your alignment pins. So when you rotate it clockwise, it should lock into place and seat until you hear that click into position. Once you have the scope connected, you also want to make sure that you connect your air-water bottle to the air-water inlet, also located at the connector section of the scope. With the 140, 160, 180 series endoscopes, the proper way to connect the air-water bottle is to use the largest port or the inlet down to the largest port of the connector, making it vertical until it slides on, and then you rotate it 90 degrees and then slide it onto the scope. Once connected, you can power on the tower. And just wait a couple seconds until the system starts to set up. So as it starts to recognize the scope and starts to power up the system, you'll see some of the settings or some of the features of the scope that start to pop up and then disappear. Once that initial screen disappears, you can go ahead and proceed with checking the scope and the video image of the endoscope. To turn on the light on most Olympus light sources and on this CLV 160 light source, there's going to be an ignition switch. You go ahead and depress the ignition switch until you hear that click that it's powering on, and you'll look at the distal tip at an angle to make sure that you're getting light coming out of the distal tip. Now, you don't want to look directly into the light because obviously it's very, very bright. Now, when you're assessing the video image of the scope, you want to go over any type of lettering or any type of object that you can try to get an idea of the clarity of the image. So you're looking for any type of imperfections or color degradations that might pop up in the image. Now, it's always good practice at the beginning, if there is a concern about color or the way the image looks, is to always start off with the white balance. Most processors will automatically white balance it, but there is occasionally that you do have to watch this area right here of the Olympus light source, the processor, where it shows a white balance feature. And to white balance, you would probably use a white surface like a gauze or a white balancing cup. And what you do is go ahead and put this into the white balancing cup, and you depress the white balance until you hear that audible tone. That usually indicates that you're good for white balancing. Alright, once you've already cleared the white balance aspect of that, then you should have the proper color set up and are ready to go ahead and proceed with the procedure. Again, you can also use other objects, just like a piece of newspaper or a cardboard box that has some lettering to it, and what you're looking for is overall clarity of the image. You can also select things that have color so that you can also check the color contrast of the image as well too. Here at Kanai we also use a special fixture that actually sets it into the distal tip, or the bending section of the scope, where we can actually look at certain targets and field of view positions. If you look at the screen, we can notice where our target is and what type of field of view that you're going to be looking for. But in many cases, these are already preset by the factory in regards to its field of view, so there should be no issues when you see a nice clear image. We'll go a little bit into the air-water, since we connected that system up. When we do look for air-water, we're looking for both proper airflow and proper water flow. The best way to check that is to first listen to your valve, or the top of the scope where your air-water valve is located, and make sure that you do hear air coming out of that valve. It's considered a two-way valve, so when you cover the hole in the air-water button or air-water valve, it will send that down to the distal tip of the scope. And we usually have a small cup or a basin of water that we go ahead and test it with, so when we go ahead and put the distal tip in the water and cover that air, we should see a continuous flow of bubbles coming out of the distal tip, indicating air is coming out of the scope. Now when we do check water, we can do it both the two ways. We like to also look at it on the screen to make sure that the water flow is going over the lenses, and that's just by depressing the valve completely. So when you cover the hole on the air-water valve, that is for air. When you depress it, that's for water. And so you're looking for a nice constant stream of water flow over the lens. Or you can also shut down your processor or your light source, so it turns off the light, turn it back on so that the air pump is on, and then you can visually look at it at the distal tip to make sure the water flow is coming out of the scope. So I'm going to check it. So if you don't, then you possibly have a blockage in your air-water system. But you also want to make sure that you do check your valves to see if there's any type of problems with your seals of your water valves. So here we're getting some water coming out of the distal tip. So we're good. Okay? I'll see you guys again on the next video. Thanks a lot.